In the 1800s, a young man spent years wandering around and worrying his relatives over what he would do with his life, much like parents today worry over their children who are slow to start adult life. Only this man became a typical polymath of early Victorian England. Traveler, archaeologist, politician and diplomat, writer, art collector and scholar, and a profound influence on the archaeology of Assyria. Austin Henry Layard was born March 5, 1817, in Paris, France, to a civil servant of the British colonial government of Ceylon, what is today known as Sri Lanka. However, due to his father's asthma, the family spent much of its time in Florence, Italy. Partly due to this move, young Layard was mostly educated at home in an environment fostered by the artistic visitors to his parents' home. It was an unorthodox education that created more than the average amount of independence in a child. This proved disastrous to his social life when he was sent to boarding school in Richmond, England. Not even his solicitor uncle's friendship with politician and author Benjamin Disraeli could alleviate his misery. This early experience of being an outcast amongst his peers would continue for the rest of his life. Unfortunately for Henry, England brought even more troubles. His father died of congestion of the lungs at age 51, and despite his childless uncle taking an interest in him, Layard's request to join the firm was denied. His uncle deemed 21-year-old Henry to be too young. The impression wasn't helped by the fact that Layard didn't like law and struggled to focus on it. Instead, he started drifting through life. He traveled to Finland, Denmark, and Russia in 1838 before he had to return to England and the dreaded law studies. His saving grace appeared to be another uncle, then a barrister in Ceylon, who introduced him to a man named Mitford, a businessman just back from Morocco. Mitford would soon be headed overland through the Ottoman Empire to the colony in order to avoid seasickness. It was suggested that Layard might pass his exams, travel with Mitford, and gain law experience in Ceylon before returning to his other uncle's firm. Layard, at 22, with no Oriental language knowledge nor horseback riding experience, jumped at the chance. With Mitford, he set off in 1839 through the Balkans to Constantinople, where he fell deathly ill with malaria. While Mitford continued on, Layard was treated by the same doctor as Lord Byron had been on his deathbed. Luckily, Layard survived and quickly caught up to Mitford on the road. While Layard had taken every opportunity to visit ruins during their travels, it was not until they reached Mosul in April 1840 that he found his passion. Across the river in the low hills sat ruins called Nineveh. They fired the young man's imagination beyond anything their Roman and Greek counterparts had managed. At the time, there were few recovered records of the Assyrian Empire. Layard convinced his companion to stay for a fortnight to allow him time to explore the mounds. During this time, he encountered the British vice-consul who invited the two travelers to accompany him on a trip to the ruins of Al-Hatra in the Mesopotamian desert. At the time, only one research paper had been written on the area by a surgeon attached to the political resident in Baghdad. After briefly losing their way in mist and rain, Layard had his first glimpse of the ruins. Not far from us rose a vast and magnificent pile of buildings, and a long line of walls of stone masonry with equidistant towers. It was so fairy-like and unexpected that I could scarcely believe my senses, and fancied myself in a dream. Layard would take measurements and make drawings of the site under the gaze of the local Bedouin, who believed he was seeking gold in the ruins. At the time, there were rumors that a European army would take over the country for treasure. These rumors would cause Layard a great deal of trouble in his travels. From there, they floated down the Tigris River, passing the ruins of Nimrud. Their boatmen on the journey regaled the young Englishmen with tales of the ancient city, of a great dam that had once been used as a causeway to cross from the city to the baths on the other side of the river. By now, Layard wanted nothing more than to explore all these sights. Thoughts of being a lawyer in Ceylon were forgotten. However, Layard would continue to travel with Mitford for another few weeks into August 1840. The two men parted ways, with Layard off to see ruins in the Bakhtiari Mountains, and Mitford continuing on the original plan to reach Ceylon. After parting ways, Layard attempted to cross the mountains to the south and reach the rich plains fed by the Disful and Karan rivers, but he encountered hostile tribesmen and another bout of malaria. He then headed east to Isfahan. Upon reaching the city, he managed to secure an audience with the leader of a Bakhtiari tribe, who agreed to take him with them into the mountains when they left. Naturally, others in the city expressed concern over Layard's plans, but he continued anyway. He wandered with the tribesmen for several months before returning to Constantinople in 1842. In Constantinople, he met Sir Stratford Canning, the British ambassador. Stratford liked the young man, who spent so much time mapping his routes and learning Persian and Arabic. Layard's notes, maps, and knowledge of grazing and commerce centers, gained from 2 years of wandering, proved of use to the British diplomats. Stratford in turn gave him a job. In August 1842, he sent Layard to western Turkey to investigate reported unrest in Bosnia and Serbia, though he was to act as a private traveler and not mention any attachment to the embassy. This deception did not last long, as the British consul in the area was missing from his post, and Layard was known to carry letters from the ambassador. Matters were also not helped by the young man embroiling himself in political intrigue. As a radical, he sympathized with the nationalists of Bosnia and Serbia, who were attempting to extricate their nations from an empire. The British consul was pro-Russian, and the Russian-backed ruler of the area had just been deposed in a revolution. Given the Russian sympathies of the official, Layard decided to investigate personally, and the Serbian government put its faith and official documents in his hands. On his return to Constantinople, Layard found Stratford already understood the situation and had ordered the consul back to his post. The consul himself was furious to discover that Layard had been there on the ambassador's orders, and that he had been friendly with the revolutionaries. He then began a campaign against Layard. There were suspicions that Layard worked for the revolutionaries, and strongly worded letters from the ambassador arrived. Despite this, Layard wrote to his aunt that he believed Stratford was secretly his friend, and that he foresaw a brilliant career open to him in the East. He must have been lucky, at least, as he kept his unofficial position. By 1845, Layard returned to his earlier fascination with the ruins of Nineveh and Nimrud. Layard left for Mosul to make a preliminary report for Stratford Canning. They arrived in Nimrud that November with guns, spears, greyhounds, and excavating tools. Nimrud at the time was a long line of consecutive mounds, which might have been walls. A cone to the north was the remains of a ziggurat, which Layard referred to as a pyramid due to its appearance. A ziggurat is actually a rectangular stepped tower, sometimes surmounted by a temple. During his initial excavations, he came across reliefs locals found in rubbish heaps, and ivory figures in the bottom chamber of the Northwest Palace. These included the figure of a king and a crouching sphinx. It was during the next year that they uncovered a giant human head sculpture and exclaimed that they had found Nimrod himself. Nimrod is a biblical figure said to be a great-grandson of Noah and the leader of the people who built the Tower of Babel in the Bible. Over the years, Layard discovered more than half a dozen pairs of colossal guardian figures guarding palace entrances and doorways. These are Lamassu, statues with a male human head, the body of a lion or bull, and wings. They have heads carved in the round, but the body at the side is in relief. In 1847, Layard brought 2 of the colossi, weighing 9 tons each, including 1 lion and 1 bull, to London. After 18 months and several near disasters, he succeeded in bringing them to the British Museum. This involved loading them onto a wheeled cart. They were lowered with a complex system of pulleys and levers operated by dozens of men. The cart itself was towed by 300 men. He initially tried to hook up the cart to a team of buffalo and have them haul it. However, the buffalo refused to move. Then, the statues were loaded onto a barge which required 600 goat skins and sheep skins to keep it afloat. After arriving in London, a ramp was built to haul them up the steps and into the museum on rollers. After spending a few months in England and receiving the degree of Doctor of Civil Law from the University of Oxford and the founder's gold medal of the Royal Geographical Society, Layard returned to Constantinople as attaché to the British Embassy, and, in August 1849, started on a second expedition, in the course of which he extended his investigations to the ruins of Babylon and the mountains of southern Mesopotamia. He is credited with discovering the Library of Ashurbanipal, named after the last great king of the Assyrian Empire during this period. The library itself was filled with inscribed tablets and cylinders, which filled rooms to a foot above the ground. His record of this expedition, Discoveries in the Ruins of Nineveh and Babylon, was published in 1853. His work, especially the library, overwhelmingly set the foundation for the science of Assyriology, which modern archaeologists still pursue. Layard himself returned to London in 1851 to supervise the unpacking and cataloguing of the artifacts he'd excavated and that would now be housed in the British Museum. However, the new foreign minister decided to offer Layard the position of Undersecretary of the Foreign Office, a surprise to everyone including Layard. He accepted. Not everyone was pleased due to his radicalism. However, this position only lasted a few weeks, in part because he was impetuous and criticized the government. He instead ended up in Parliament to represent Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. In Parliament, he was jokingly referred to as the member from Nineveh. His political career was not a great success. Though he witnessed the Crimean War and investigated the cause of the Indian Mutiny, he never advanced very far. He instead went through a cycle of winning and losing elections, and serving on various committees until his resignation in 1869. Layard was appointed a Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath and retired to Venice. He devoted much of his time to collecting pictures of the Venetian school and to writing on Italian art, with the occasional publication of his adventures in the Middle East. At the beginning of 1894, Layard and his wife returned to England at the urging of his Italian doctor to see a different doctor. They settled in London. By June, there was a blood clot in his lung. By July 4th, it affected his brain. He died on July 5th, 1894, at the age of 77, childless, and survived by his wife. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, a comment, subscribe if you want. There's always more history.